How's that? You guys hear me now? I think my microphone. I wish I could get me more followers too. Hold on a second, y'all. Mic check. All right, there we go. Is the sound back? Much better. Okay. All right. Well, you're just going to have to deal with loud. That's how I am. Anyway, how is everybody? I hope you're well. I hope everybody's well. I too wish I could get more followers. So, anyway. Speaking of followers, speaking of viewers, speaking of listeners, for those times when I have sound, it had been far too long since I'd had a serious screw up with the audio, though, guys. Don't you think? It was time. It was time. I was trying to play D&D last night, and my the USB cable that I had plugged into my mic just picked last night to just die, just go straight to heaven, and I was like, oh boy. So I had to scramble around and dig up this thing, which this USB cable actually works really well, but I found it on the ground outside. That's not a lie. I was walking the dog one evening, and I saw this USB cable lying in the gutter, and I was like, somebody lose a USB cable? No? All right. And I figure it went with the smashed up set of PC speakers that were in bits and pieces and flinders in the park. So anyway, I brought it home and I tested it on a bunch of different things, including this mic, and it worked. But then I promptly forgot where I rolled it up and stuck it away. So while I was searching through bins over there, I had to keep like rushing back over to the computer and typing things to my players in Discord, and then going back over to the bin and trying to find the cord. And I did, and it works for the most part when I remember to have it plugged in. So yeah, and I'm still I'm supposed to get a shock mount for my someone donated me a shock mount, and they're going to ship it to me soon for the microphone. But I don't think that's going to change that much for you guys. It'll look really cool. Ricky says, I made an apple and onion pie on purpose? Like you did, like that wasn't a mistake? Apple and onion. Is that a thing in Minecraft that you can do? I'm just teasing you, man. Good on you. Onions have layers, and so does apple pie. So it works well together. But anyway, because my brain apparently has data retention issues, I had thought that Yang Zhao and I had agreed to get together on Friday. It turns out Tuesday is the day. So I will be on Yang Zhao's Storytime live stream tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern. There is the YouTube link. You guys can check that out. I will share that over with my friends on Facebook also. But stop on by as I hold court on various opinions and answer different questions that Yang has for me, and I fix all the problems in the world just like I do. So that's the thing that's going to happen tonight at 9 o'clock. And I know you people don't have anything better to do, so don't pretend you're not going to go over there and listen. But in advance, thank you, Yang, for having me on your live stream. I'm sure you'll come to regret it. 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock. 9 p.m. is when that stream begins. Yes, live in 8 hours, August 24, 9 p.m. If you click on over to the link, you will see it. Why am I talking like Sulu? Lock that explosion and fire. Well, there you go, Katie. You'll be able to come home and put your feet up and listen to me talk even more. Because isn't that what you guys really want? I would run this like a radio station if I could get away with it. Just sit here all day and play music. It used to be back in even the late 90s, like 98 onwards, you could do stuff like that. You could have, if you had broadband, or even if you were willing to drop the quality down, you could run a radio station on the internet. ASCAP, BMI, the various record labels, RIAA, they didn't have any idea how to cope with the internet. There were no laws governing it as far as music goes and that sort of thing. And you could just sit there and run a radio station on the internet and just play music. Just like I want to run the all Led Zeppelin and Allman Brothers channel on the internet, and it's the year of our Lord 1999. I've got me the fancy schmancy ISDN line. Now I might have a global audience of maybe 15 or 20 people, which would be more than I have right now. But anyway, I could do it. And then things with music piracy started blowing up, and you just can't anymore. So we're going live at 7:07. Okay. All right, that's fine. IR will have his live stream going. I will be in the audience until I have to go live stream. Now don't send them to my channel though. Send them to Yang's channel. IR saying we're going live at 7, and I'll try to send some folks over to your channel at 9. I will be in the audience for Imperial Ramblings until I have to go and do my my guest spot. And Chris Moneymaker and I are working on some things together. So there's some collabs that are going to come down with Chris. That's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, I got a lot of collabs in the works. So, sorry. Noises under the table. My wife's cat is in here, and I really don't want her deciding to start chewing on cables and that sort of thing. So, I just had to make sure she wasn't getting into mischief. All right. So let's talk about last night's AD&D game, because gosh, that was a lot of fun. It was fun, but it got knocked down hilarious at the end, and I want to tell you guys about that. So, introduced 3 new players last night. Some folks that I know actually here in the Central Florida area. I am slowly building a coalition to balance things out. So you got folks out on the West Coast. I got like 4 or 5 players who are out on the West Coast. I got a guy in Denver, or was it Boulder? No, it's Denver. Yep, that's right, Denver. And I've got one player in the Midwest, but now I'm slowly starting to build up folks over here, and not just on the East Coast, but right here in Central Florida. So 3 local folks to me, joined the AD&D game. They brought their new characters on board: a ranger, a monk, and a magic user. the party had just, the original party, as it were, had just slain 2 green dragons. And in doing so, had just gotten their hands on literal tons of treasure. They slew the dragons in their lair, their above ground lair, basically a giant nest in the middle of a swamp near Castle Greyhawk. And I introduced the new players as basically, you hear the sounds of this massive battle, and you come to the edge of the tamarack stand there, and there's this great circle in the middle of the trees, and you see a dead dragon and a bunch of people standing around. One NPC and one player character got killed by the dragon's breath. The NPC, I made his constitution roll because they promised to bring him back if the dragon killed him, and so he came back. The player, Shelby's illusionist, well, that's not the player, but the player of the illusionist, Shelby, could not make it, so she said, hey, I'll make my system shock survival roll the next time I'm there. So we'll have to see what happens with that. So these new folks that came along, these 3 new folks, the ranger, the monk, and the magic user, said, this is an impressive lot of treasure, and you guys are mighty warriors. Can we hang with you? And the party said, fine. They threw up Daern's instant fortress to make shelter and brought the fallen inside to cast Raise Dead on them as best they could. The monk and the magic user and Logan, who is the ranger who's been in the party, said, hey, we'll go back to the city of Greyhawk and get porters and bearers and teamsters and so on to come and get all this gold. Because if we start trying to take it home, even with our bag of holding, we're going to take one parcel of it back and we're going to come back and it's going to be gone. So we'll just set up this fortress here, send a small group back to Greyhawk, and then they can bring back a team of mules. Now, I know what you're thinking. They split the party, Bill. Did you punish them for it? I didn't so much punish them for it as I just let the dice fall where they may. And they're about most of a day away from the city of Greyhawk right now. And the trio did encounter a wolf were, which if you're not familiar with AD&D, and I don't know if this is in other editions, so you guys who play other editions can correct me on this. But a wolf were is essentially, if you think of what a werewolf looks like when they do the humanoid wolf thing, that's its natural state. It can disguise itself as human. It's kind of like an opposite werewolf. He tried to stop them, said, oh, look, I have food. I have this lovely stew that I'm making. I've been here a couple of days. I haven't seen any travelers pass through. The ranger knew that was a lie, by the way, because the party had just come through the day before. He had not been there a couple of days. He had his little tent set up and, So Logan gets his bow out and gets ready to put a cloth yard shaft through this fellow's wishbone. The monk stops him. The old man starts to sing, or starts to play a flute. Everybody makes their saving throw because wolf wares can mesmerize characters with singing. Well, I extended it out and said, playing of an instrument. But they realized that something had happened because suddenly the horses all failed their saving throws. So, they just kind of start lethargically staggering around. Logan spurred his horse to pull away from the monk, dismounts, draws his sword. The old man is like, oh, no, everything's fine. Let me just keep playing my flute for you. The magic user steps out from behind his horse, shoots a few magic missiles into the guy, who then promptly draws a flatchet. That is a broad-headed sword, a machete-like weapon, and prepares to attack the party, leaps at the ranger. The magic missiles had damaged the thing enough, and when I used the old Dungeon Master's assistant to call up this guy, I hadn't gotten the best of hit points. I only got like average hit points. So between the Wolfware losing initiative, not getting a chance to summon wolves to his aid, and having been shot with magic missiles, it really just took one sword blow from the ranger to finish him off. They found some new, neatly stacked bones in the tent. I said, they were still kind of damp and sticky, and they all glanced over at the stew pot and realized that, yeah, that's probably, yeah. Found his treasure, 3,000 copper pieces, which they didn't bother with, but also a bag full of gems, which they did take, and then they continued on to the city. Robilar introduced himself to one of the new characters, the magic user, who thought he seemed like a swell guy, and he is a swell guy. To my players who might be watching this, Robilar is fine. You guys are paranoid about him. So, that's, that was all the ongoings at the town. They gathered up the men-at-arms, sent the word out, spent a few hours scraping up the men-at-arms and hiring teamsters and a team of 10 mules, which, with what they can already carry on their own horses and the cart that they have, I deemed they would be able to get that out. They go back to the campsite. It's a day's march along the way. They passed the little encampment that the Wolfware had, and it's thoroughly tossed. The bag of 3,000 copper is of course gone. Little just scraps of his tent here and again. But they go back, and as they're there, they're talking about this vast pile of treasure that they're going to bring back. 7 hill giants come stomping out of the tree line some 100 yards away. And I give them the classic. One of them yells, "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of a Greyhawk man." Weapons are drawn, intentions are declared. The giants start throwing rocks at the Daern's instant fortress, which a hill giant can throw a rock as effectively as a siege machine can in terms of structural damage. Well, not quite as effectively. So rocks start gonging off the tower, and this makes Caerleon very nervous. So 3 players charge to the giants to stop them. The new ranger, Hayden, Caerleon, and Petra charge over and engage the giants. I'm sorry, not Petra yet. It was Grindel the dwarf. They start hacking away at 3 of the giants. The lead giant tells the other giants, bring that tower down. Meanwhile, Petra and Brand Grayson start trying to get all the teamsters and all the men-at-arms and everybody into the tower for their safety. And it was like a classic battle scene, just all these you had all the common folk milling around, sheltering inside the castle, and up on the next floor, Kane was sitting vigil over the still comatose Endora, and Jane was there. You've got rocks smashing into the tower, and meanwhile, out on the field, the party is hacking and chopping. They're taking blows back. It's just this back and forth and back and forth. The new magic user, Calcifer, yes, I'm not making that up. That's the new magic user's name. His name is Calcifer. Climbs to the top of the tower, looks out over the parapet, detonates a fireball on top of a couple of the giants. There were only 2 that could get caught inside the blast radius. So damages a couple of them. I check their morale. Nothing doing. They're fine. They're staying in the fight. Arrows are being slung at them. Just a real Donnybrook. So to jump to the end, because this is going to take us almost into a half an hour, and we still got to talk about AD&D. They killed off all the giants in grand style melee. Flame strike spells were employed. Burning oil was hurled. Fists of fury were unleashed by the monk. It was glorious. Glorious! 1 giant's left. At this point, I check his morale, and I'm thinking, even if he rolls 100, he's going to be uncertain about his chances. Well, he broke and ran, and at this point, Veteran, in the previous round, had yelled, "Make sure you leave 1 alive. I want to try something," and then runs out of the tower. I've got this mental image now of Veteran as being like Krieger from Archer, if you're familiar with that TV show. Krieger is this actually literally mad scientist who has questionable ethics. And Veteran kind of fits that mold. So Veteran gets within range. He basically spends the rest of the round sprinting across the field towards the fleeing hill giant. Or towards the hill giants. Giant, singular. Before he can flee. And casts Charm Monster. And is running after the thing, yelling, Wait, you forgot me. And the hill giant looks over his shoulder and yells, "Well, come on, buddy! Don't worry, I'll save you!" Sprints over, grabs Veteran, throws him over his shoulder, and then sprints towards the woods. Because he's got to protect his new friend. So all the party sees, or the party hears Veteran yelling something at the hill giant. The hill giant says, "Don't worry, I got you." Sprints over, grabs Veteran, throws him over his shoulder, and heads for the woods. And all the party sees is the hill giant running towards the horizon with the magic user over his shoulder. Because he charmed Monster on him. So it was damn funny. Just the mental image of the giant doing a U-turn with all these missiles and stuff being flung at him and melee attacks missing and all, and just scoops up the magic user, plops him on his shoulder like a baby and says, "Let me know if they're following us," and running for the tree line. And that's where we left off. Everyone was laughing pretty hard about that, and it was a good time. It was a good time. Yes, Krieger is freaking awesome, Chris. What, so you can play YYZ now? It's YYZ, and no, it's impossible. All right. So that's how last night's game went. And you know what? I ran a game with 13 people, and the world didn't end. So anyone who came from Reddit and said that I can't run a game with that many people, well, it was the same number of people that I usually run the game with. I had absences last night. Jeremy, who plays Rabindranath, our bard, couldn't make it. Ray, if you're watching this, man, I hope you're feeling better, dude. Ray had a medical issue that kept him out, and Shelby was not feeling well. So I had my group of 13 last night, and everything was fine. We had lots of fun. I don't think anybody felt like they didn't have ample opportunity to role play. But that is an example of a fun role-playing session. And you, too, can have fun role-playing sessions. And we're going to talk about how today. And we're going to jump in and we're going to spend a little bit of time on the topic of dungeons. Now, we talked about a lot about combat and XP rewards. One thing I didn't touch on, because I want to save it for more world building stuff, is we didn't talk about siege mechanics. And there are siege mechanics. They came into play last night with the hill giants throwing giant boulders. But we're going to talk about siege mechanics and so on, and interrelated combat like that. And things like flying combat and underwater combat. We'll touch on all those subjects. But I wanted to talk a little bit today, because I knew I would have a slightly limited time. I want to talk about dungeons and dungeon dressing. This is something that is absolutely awesome. Let's see. Wait, while that decides whether or not it can find it. All right. Everybody, when they sit down with AD&D to run an AD&D game, one of the first things as a new DM that you want to do, that you may want to do, I should say, is design your own dungeon. I mean, it's right there on the packaging. Dungeons and Dragons. Not wide open spaces and dragons, not shopping malls and dragons, although one could argue that a shopping mall is rather dungeon-like, in layout, or if you've ever had to work in one in actuality. But the idea of an underground labyrinth, I mean, it's as old a trope in literary history as literature itself. Theseus and the Minotaur. Well, what was the labyrinth if not a mazy dungeon? Just and you know, it carries on up to modern times. It's a trope. Dungeons and Dragons made the idea of a dungeon a trope, but it was certainly there before Dungeons and Dragons. And I mentioned a few before. Stardock, Moria, the tunnels underneath Spiral Castle in the Chronicles of Prydain, innumerable caverns, so on, and etc. in literature that characters explored. Well, they're not simply, and they shouldn't be simply, just gilt holes in the ground. Gilt, G-I-L-T, not G-U-I-L-T. No, the way you should treat these places, you have to give them a palpable sense of being. You really want to impress on the players, especially if you're going for the great unknown underworld. It's not just an abandoned mine, or maybe it is an abandoned mine, but it's not just a straight tunnel that runs, 100 feet back, and there's 20 kobolds crouching down waiting for you to come and try and take their sack of 100 gold pieces. So we have a great set of tools in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and we're all the way up on page 217. Dungeon dressing. This is miscellaneous items and points of semi-interest for corridors and unpopulated areas, or to round out otherwise drab places. Don't just have your hallways be these pointless, empty spaces that exist only to connect one encounter area to another. Come over to page 217 and check these tables out. You can roll for these, or if they don't fit, you can pick these. But you should absolutely lean on this when you're talking about designing your dungeon. There's air currents and odors. I mean, who doesn't think of the haunted house as like, ooh, this has a, I just passed a cold spot. I just walked past a cold spot. Well, there's cold current on air currents. All kinds of smells: putrid smell, rotting vegetation, salty wet smell, acrid smell, smoky smell, urine. Maybe you're near the middens that the monsters use. Where do the monsters go to the bathroom? They're orcs, kobolds, goblins, hobgoblins, gnolls, and bugbears. Probably against the wall, just a little bit removed from their own bedding. But if they have to, then it might be that empty corridor might be ankle deep in monster pee. And there you've got to, you can check for it. The very air itself is a fume. But, you've got a table, you can check for the condition of the air. Is it clear? Is it foggy or steamy? Or is it foggy near the floor? Is it hazy with dust or smoke? Or is there a mist to it? Now, a big thing with people who make their own 3D terrain that I've seen, and I didn't know what this term meant till I asked about it, is scatter terrain. Such and such, that's just my box full of scatter terrain. Like pieces of the ground you just throw out at random. Well, no. It's just little loose items you throw around on the map. But even if you're just doing theater of the mind, you can have scatter terrain. You should have scatter terrain in your dungeon. And there's a whole list here of optional scatter terrain. Again, you should really decorate up your dungeon. Make it seem like... I have had characters find stuff on this list, and they made in their heads a whole story about why it was there. Ashes, bones, broken bottles, cobwebs, a bent piece of copper. I had a bent piece of copper in a game. Coin, copper, bent. And the players decided that meant that, they built up this mental image of a civilization of monsters that was moving to and fro and had either deliberately or accidentally discarded a coin. And it was a fairly mundane piece of dungeon, but you know what? I inspired them, and they inspired me. Broken dagger hilt, leather boot, a pick handle, a 5-foot pole, a broken pole. And your characters may find some of these useful. Broken sword blade could be maybe reforged into a dagger. A 5 2/3 foot long pole. I don't know why Gary was so insistent on exactly 5 2/3 feet, but there it is. That's still a useful item. A trickle of water, a large puddle of water, wax drippings, a candle stub, iron bar bent and rusted, a javelin head, blunt, a hammerhead, bits of hair and fur, food scraps, a cracked flask. The list just goes on and on of things you should sprinkle throughout your dungeon. Don't just have these perfectly bare corridors, okay? And if you're wondering how and why these pieces got here, consider the gelatinous cube. It's not going to want to eat any of this stuff. It'll just scatter it out. Even if you don't have a reason to, a cube might have gone through at some point in the past and just deposited that trash on the floor. So consider all of those things for your characters to literally and figuratively, or figuratively and literally stumble over. For example, rotten rope. Well, if a character's fleeing ass over tea kettle away from monsters, that might trip them up as they're running down a corridor. And what might send them running? We have on the lower right-hand corner of page 217, unexplained sounds and weird noises. You should absolutely spring these on your players. And there's so many things. And again, these will have players providing you with fuel for in-game ideas. All these great noises, a banging or slam sound, bellowing, a gonging sound, buzzing, chanting. Why are the characters hearing chanting? Well, that might send them into a panicked tizzy. Chiming, chirping, clanking, clashing, clicking, coughing, creaking, drumming, footsteps approaching that just never get there. Faint giggling, sobbing, splashing, splintering sounds, squeaking. Select noises as desired. So you can pick that, you can dice for it. Locate in 20 to 40 foot areas for detection. Have at least 120 intervals between each, which makes sense. You don't want to have drumming and then 10 feet later shuffling and then 10 feet screaming. You want to space this out. And you definitely want to keep the characters on their toes. Now for rooms and otherwise empty spaces, we have tons of stuff. Is it a temple? Well, here's religious articles and furnishings. Is it just a place where monsters hang out? A monster being anything that the characters don't know what it is. It could be a friendly bunch of adventurers that set up their headquarters in a dungeon for some damn reason. Well, there might be all of this stuff there. Torture chamber furnishings. Does your game run towards the outre? Well, here's some torture chamber furnishings. Magic user furnishings. I had my party fight an evil magic user. I used a few things off this list for that. And if you have containers, general description of container contents if you don't already have something for it. Miscellaneous utensils and personal items. And clothing and footwear. Condiments and seasoning. Guys, there's so much stuff here. Food and drink. Your characters kick over a bandit's lair. They're going to have stuff. Well, what have they got to eat? It's right here. The point of this is, the point of these lists is not so much that you should go down and mechanically sort through these lists and say, okay, I rolled on food and drink. I rolled on condiments and seasoning. Yes, that's in there. I rolled on miscellaneous utensils. I rolled on sounds and smells and air currents and general crap lying on the floor. So it's to inspire you. It's to inspire you to make your dungeons more than just bare empty holes. Let's take a look. Let me see if I can find this real quick. That appears too many times. I did not think that it was. Let's see. Should be able to find this fairly quickly. Here we go. Okay. On page 95 is probably one of the coolest things ever created for AD&D. There's a lot of myth that surrounds this about like, ooh, is this from Gary's home campaign? Was this supposed to be the original map for the Moat House in T1? And the answer is no. Gary just created this whole cloth on the fly. But this is an adventure map, obviously. If you flip over to page 95, my challenge to you guys, it's not so much homework because this is a big ask, and I know you guys, this is not like making a character. This is a lot more homework. But I want you as an exercise, as a step towards becoming a master of the game, truly. Take some of those things from Appendix I, and I want you to scatter them through here. I want you to consider this dungeon map. This is the monastery cellars and secret crypts. There's already a wandering monster table. There's a key. I want you to take this map. If you're new to AD&D and you haven't done this before, doubly so. But I want you to consider this map, even if only a small section of it, in Appendix I. And first I want you to think about this dungeon in terms of just what it is. Just bare. Just don't even try to mentally populate the rooms, all right? Put yourself in a first-person perspective moving through it. Everything in here is well, it's just bare 10 by 10 by whatever length or width or what have you, stone underground buildings. It's about as interesting as walking through your utility corridors in a shopping mall. Or, if you picture a university building that's completely emptied out. And that's how much fun it would be for your players. All right, we walk from this room to the next room. We listen at the door. We're going to talk about listening at doors and so on and etc. because we talked about sounds, but that's for a little bit down the line. Now consider this with the sounds and the odors and the feelings and the air temperature changes and the various bits of stuff scattered around. Gary does this a little bit. Room 1, I'm going to read this to you. So if you don't have your Dungeon Master's Guide or you're just listening but not able to watch, this is a perfect example of the application of those things. First, I'm going to give you just the regular, I'm not going to read this like Gary wrote it. I'm just going to say, okay, you guys come down a flight of stairs. There's a 30 by 30 room. Exits are on the middle of the western door, the middle of the western wall, middle of the eastern wall, and directly due south. And the openings are all 10 by 10. Oh, and there's a skull on the floor. The only reason that I as a DM would mention the skull on the floor is because there's a gemstone in it. But I do mention the skull on the floor. But I don't see. I didn't give anything else. I gave no flavorful consideration of the room. I didn't put stuff in the room, etc. I just said it's a 30 by 30 room, exits east, west, and south, and there's a skull on the floor. What are the characters going to do? That's the only thing of note I mentioned other than the exits. So they're immediately going to be drawn to the skull and realize, aha, it has a gemstone hidden in it. But let's go to the way that it is written up using the flavor of Appendix I. A damp and vaulted chamber, 30 feet square and arched to a 20-foot high center roof. Arches begin at 8 feet and meet at a domed peak. Walls are cut stone block. Floor is rough. Thick webs hide the ceiling. See A and B below. Then it talks about the large spiders lurking in the ceiling above. And B, rotting sacks. There are 10 moldy sacks of flour and grain stacked here. The cloth is easily torn to reveal the contents. If all of them are opened and searched, there is a 25% probability that the last will have a yellow mold in it, and handling it will automatically cause it to burst, and all within 10 feet must save versus poison or die in one turn. And we go to C. That's down the hall to the west. This is a heavy oak door with bronze hardware. It's remarkable only in that if any character listens at it, he or she will detect a moaning which will rise then fade away. Unbeknownst to listeners, it is the strong breeze which goes through Area 2. As soon as the door is open, a wind gust will extinguish torches and be 50% likely to blow out lanterns as well. The wind continues to make the corridor impossible for torches until the door is shut. See, guys, that's the difference between your dungeon being a stone hole in the ground, where the monsters are standing on numbers on the floor, waiting for you to walk in and pick something up, or try to pick something up and then attack, and a living, breathing underground that's just a slight taste of how it can be, how it should be in your games. So again, I want you to look at this. This is on page 94, 95, and then there's a play example that starts at the end of the left-hand column on page 96, the first dungeon adventure. And it picks up all the way over on page 97. But I want you to think about some of these locations. Pick some interesting locales and how you would decorate them, how you would actually make them interesting places that your characters won't just go, nothing in there, and keep on moving. Now, not every square inch of a dungeon is going to be a fun house, but you should absolutely sprinkle stuff around. Look, I love the gold box games, the SSI AD&D games. But back then, short of text descriptions that would pop up on the screen and sometimes flash by too fast to catch, there was no sense of being in a dirty, ruined, nasty underground place. I mean, it was 8-bit graphics. 16 colors on the screen at once. Literally a beep or a boop. I mean, I think other than the kind of a thudding sound when you would push the joystick to move forward on my C64, there was no sound in the Forgotten Realms games. Oh yeah, when you would fire an arrow or detonate a spell, there was kind of a little scratchy sound that would play, like when a fireball would go off, or a high-pitched sound for different types of spells. But the point is, there was nothing there. And as much as I love the games, they did kind of bore me after a while, because I felt like I just could have been walking through a well-lit, unoccupied office space with the walls done up in drywall. There was nothing to give me a sense of, hey, you're in a dark, dangerous underground, and stuff can jump out and get you. So consider that when you're creating your dungeon. Those are all very important things, and your players will come to enjoy those things. And Chris says, 5 2/3 foot pole sounds like someone's 10-foot pole got caught after triggering. Exactly. Or maybe they, were probing ahead and it got slurped up by a gelatinous cube, or rolled over by a gray ooze, or something like that. So just take all of those things into consideration when you're building your dungeon, and don't ever have a bare room just be a bare room. All right? How many rooms in your house, even your utility closet, has probably got something in it that might make someone moving through your house for the first time, opening every door, looking at everything, stop and go, huh? You got that straightened out coat hanger you use to grab that one thing in there that you got to do to reset the furnace or the air conditioner? Or you got, that screwdriver that you keep there just so you can open and change out the filter every month? Well, that's good. You open the narrow door. There's what appears to be a rusty screwdriver there. Oh, interesting. Versus you open the door, there's an air conditioner. Okay. So just think about those things. Think about what makes your dungeon interesting. And if my concurrent viewer stream is to anything to go by, I haven't been very interesting. So Chris says, I have to say Gary's partial write-up of the DMG sample dungeon is better than a lot of professional published stuff I've read. Yes. And I really wish Gary had given us an entire adventure just smack dab in the middle of the Dungeon Master's Guide. I wish that whole thing had been filled out. But he left it to us to do. And that's what I want to try and compel you guys to. Check it out. So, that's about going to wrap us up today. But I do want to share something with you guys. For any of you guys who maybe not caught the... Oh, stop it. Maybe you guys haven't heard this yet. I am currently working on trying to get together some B-roll for an actual, introductory piece for the show. And to that end, the guys over at Bards of Greyhawk have created an absolutely fantastic piece of music. They came to me and they said, Bill, what do you want to hear for music, intro music for your show? Well, first they came to me and said, you should totally let us make intro music for your show. And I said, okay, if you guys are that big of fans, absolutely. And so they said, what do you like? And I thought about it, and since I can't play music, see our discussion about internet radio earlier, that is commercially sourced, I thought about the sound that I like. And I said, think about the Allman Brothers, like Idlewild South, the instrumental parts of Midnight Rider, or Brawny Hour, or White Summer, Black Mountainside by Led Zeppelin, just mellow, folksy kind of stuff. And I really couldn't give him any better description. I said, just stuff like that. And they said, gotcha. And in no time at all, they put together a track for me, which I'm trying to work into sort of, like I said, an opening credit sequence for the show called Summer Mountains. Little play on the Zeppelin track there. Jeremy of Bards of Greyhawk did that for me, and I am floored. And if you guys haven't heard it, well, I'm going to play it for you. But they are bardsofgreyhawk.herenow.com. You guys can check them out, and yes, I will share that with the Facebook folks also. All 0 folks listening over on Facebook. But you should absolutely go check out Bards of Greyhawk, and I'm gonna bring that up, and I'm gonna play that track for you guys. If you haven't heard it, this is amazing. And we'll kind of outro with this today, although I will say some things after it plays. So you guys listen and enjoy this. All right, that is Summer Mountain the track for my little live stream by my friends over at Bards of Greyhawk. Check them out, please, on herenow.com. I put the link in the chat there. It's their EP album cover. I don't know if you guys can see that. That is, but that is their BG1, a musical adventure for character levels 1 to 7. It's got AD&D themed songs, guys. Amazing stuff. Just a couple of things before we go. Don't forget, check me out this evening. I will be on Yang Yan Zhao's story time. I put the link there. You can go over and check out his YouTube channel. So come see me. Stop by and say hi. It'll be nice to see some of you guys over in the chat. Just a quick note, nota bene. We are currently at 762 subscribers on the YouTube channel. If you're not aware, when we hit 1,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel, we are going to celebrate by having a virtual mini convention. I will run games for you guys. You guys can hop on Discord. I'll play some AD&D, some original D&D, all kinds of fun, cool stuff. You should definitely encourage your friends, especially if they're gamers. Subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon, give me a thumbs up, leave some comments down below. That always helps with the algorithm, helps us get out there. You guys have an absolutely fantastic afternoon, and I will see you all tomorrow night in the Eastern time. And I'll have Mr. Kyle Schuant here with us. I believe he'll be able to make it. But if not, well, we'll find some fun stuff to do. All right. You guys have an absolutely wonderful afternoon. I love you all. Please have a great day. Stay safe. And I'll talk to you soon. Peace.